we get started by first welcoming all of you and thanking you for being here. I'm Eric Schwab. I oversee the People and Nature portfolio here at EDF, which means that I have the great pleasure of supporting some really smart people working on everything from climate smart agriculture to fresh water to natural climate solutions. All of those sort of fit together into this food system. I work on fisheries and oceans, which is also part of our food systems, as we'll hear later on today. And all of these things obviously increasingly sort of fit together into a range of climate solutions. So we are super pleased to be hosting the first food and climate event that is associated with the COP. And I think one of the things that is probably already apparent to everybody in this room is that farmers and fishers too are working harder and harder to produce food in the face of an ever steepening climate challenge. And we're really at a pivot point. We're at a pivot point where they can continue that fight in ways that will be continuously detrimental to stabilizing the climate, or they can become farmers and fishers, and the food system generally can be part of the solution. And I think the other thing that is obviously apparent is that the biggest challenges exist in some of the most vulnerable parts of the world. So addressing this challenge is not only an imperative for everybody globally, but it is imperative particularly for at-risk populations. So we're really at a place where we need to pivot to achieving at a minimum sustainable and equitable food for people around the world within the current environmental footprint of our agricultural systems, or hopefully, even more importantly, is to make the food systems part of our effort to stabilize the climate in a more proactive way. So really excited to be here today personally. Very excited for the sessions that we have lined up. Whether you're here with us in person or virtually, whether you're here with us for one session or all four, thank you for being here. And with that, I think you heard already one logistical point, that the session is being recorded. So audio, everything will be recorded, video, only this part of the room. So you guys back there are safe. And with that, I will turn it over to Jennifer Chow to start off the first session. And Jennifer is one of those smart people that I referenced. And she is the senior director for our climate resilient food systems work. And so, Jennifer, thank you all, and we'll get on with it.
Thank you. So great. Eric already introduced me. I'll be moderating for today. So the event runs over, you can blame me. I, as Eric said, am our Senior Director for Climate Resilient Food Systems, and it's really my honor to kick us off this morning. I think Eric already really set the stage well, so I'm going to turn right to Brent from WWF to tell us why we should pay attention, why we're here today, why we should pay attention to this report that was launched yesterday, talking about the critical role that food has to play in our climate solutions. Brent, you'll have about 10 minutes. And as I said, one of my jobs is really to keep us on time. So if you start seeing me do weird things in the corner, it means it's really time for you to wrap up. So please don't make me do that. So let me, yes. So I'll properly introduce Brent now. Brent Logan is the global food lead scientist for WWF. Previously worked for EAT, the science-based global platform for food system transformation, where he was the lead author on the EAT Landscape report on food, planet, and health. So Brent, the latest Exponential Roadmap report was released yesterday.
Yep.
Can you tell us some key takeaways from the report? Why it's important for us to know about? What does it mean to move forward at an exponential pace? And including at national level, which I think is the title for our event today.
Perfect. Yep. Thank you very much, Jennifer, and thank you everybody here at EDF for hosting us. It's a great honor to be here, and I'm glad that we could get this set up. I'll spend the next 10 minutes talking about this report that we launched a bit, but before I do so, I just want to take a quick stock take on the planet to frame our conversation. And if you just look at some of the recent headlines you have here over the last year, we've got hottest, worst case scenario, deadliest weather event, mind-boggling, testing limits of human survivability. Yeah, I think online it's actually in presenter mode, but here it's not. Unthinkable temperature surges, 1 in 500 year events, and then the latest event that we just saw within Pakistan, which is 1/3 of the country's underwater. I think all these events over the past year frame the conversation and tell us that the planet is in trouble. Something is not right. So what we need is any action that we take has to meet the level of crisis that we're facing. So therefore, incremental action is no longer enough. What we need is exponential action. And that was the framing for this report in terms of providing an exponential roadmap for how we get from where we are today to where we have to be by 2030, 2040, and 2050. Now, the report is framed around the carbon law, which is a Rockström paper. Johan Rockström published this back in 2017, which frames the scale and pace of decarbonization which is needed between now and 2050. It's built upon Moore's law, which means we have to have global greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, a second halving by 2040, and a third halving by 2050. So the pace and scale of this is exponential. We have to do it very quickly, and I think we're having a tough time wrapping our heads around how quickly this needs to be done. In addition to that, that dark green that you see on the bottom half is how much carbon dioxide we need to pull out of the atmosphere and store within the ground. And that's a lot of it. And the only way that we can do that, the best technology out there is with nature. And on that, with this new report, this carbon law was expanded to introduce this concept of a carbon law for nature, which talks about how quickly we have to work with nature and transform nature to meet the climate challenge. So what this says is we're sitting at about right now 12.5 gigatons of global emissions, which comes from agriculture and land use, 12.5. What we're saying is that by 2030, we have to reach net zero. From 12.5 to net zero by 2030. By 2040, we have to be net negative, -5 gigatons. And by 2050, -10 gigatons, which is going to be about 400 gigatons of total mitigation between now and 2050. A massive transformation of the food system in terms of flipping from the 12 gigaton number where we are today. And we have to keep our eyes completely focused on the fact that we have to get to net zero with nature by 2030. It's fast. It's exponential. Now, what does food have to do with this? Well, food is the main driver of land use today. And if you look at this figure, what it shows you on the left-hand side is the total emissions from all sources of food, which equals about 30% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And the seven columns that you see over on your right-hand side are the what would happen in terms of by implementing different actions. The first column that you see, which is this one right here, shows us that if we don't do anything, the entire carbon budget from food, or the entire carbon budget, will be consumed only by the food system. If we decarbonize all other sectors between now and 2050, but we don't act on food, the entire budget gets used up by food alone. If we implement production practices, reductions are between 14 to 40%, consumption between 30 to 48%, and food loss and waste about 27%. It's only the combined action of all of those that gets us down to the 1.5C target, which is we've all agreed on. That's the limit that we need to be shooting for. So food is absolutely central. Now, what we set out within this report is we had 8 action tracks. And within each one of these action tracks, it outlines the opportunities within each one of those for some kind of transformation. And what you can see here is that 80% of all the mitigation opportunity is directly linked to food systems. From climate smart agriculture and farming, diets and food loss and waste, climate smart grazing, IPLCs, and so on and so forth. So 80% of the mitigation that we can get from nature is directly linked to food systems. It's a huge number. So obviously, we can't do this without food. And that's why we're here today. We framed the report around three main actions: protect, manage, restore. This green one right here is protect. The pink one right here in the middle. This right here is manage. And this one right here is on the left one, restore. And what you can see here is that most of the potential for mitigation comes from the manage. It's managing the working lands that we have, the grazing lands, the farmlands, and such. This is where most of the opportunity lies. And if you look at the first two, protect and manage, between 2020 and 2030, that's where most of the action has to happen. And then it starts to taper off after that. It's the restore category that starts slowly between now and 2030, but from 2030 to 2050, that's where we really need to start restoring a lot of nature. So again, the roadmap that we lay out provides a framework and a guidance for individuals, countries, policymakers in terms of how fast they need to go to take action. But where do we do this? We outline the regional potential for protect, manage, restore in each one of the areas. So you can see that is different depending on which one of the regions that we're looking in. And I think this is a great step in terms of outlining regional potential. However, I don't think it's enough. And that's a conversation where we are today. As I think what we need to do is we need to get down into the what it looks like for individual countries, because I think individual countries at this point are asking themselves, this is all great, these global targets, but what does it mean for me? What does it mean for my country? And that's what we're starting to work on within WWF. We're launching a report in 3 weeks' time called the Great Food Puzzle, where we're looking at food system transformation in individual countries and what it will look like, and the social, the cultural, the political dimensions of this food system transformation. And how we're looking at it is like a puzzle. This global puzzle of every single country is an individual piece with its own characteristics. And when we start to put that together, we can start to really create that change and start to figure out this complex puzzle that we're all trying to solve today, and thus the focus on individual action at the national level. So what do? There's 5 I's that I would like to focus on. The first is we need more information. We don't have enough information yet. And especially information at the national level. We need to figure out what food system transformation looks like in different places. We need to work on institutions to make sure that food is emphasized at all levels, whether it's international institutions working on this, national level, NGOs. Food needs to be part of this. The third thing is integration. We need much better integration across NGOs working on this, across government agencies working on this, across the Rio conventions working on this. We're so siloed that we have to figure out how we start working together better. The fourth is inclusion. We need to make sure that anything that we do is inclusive and considers everybody working on the lands. That main category is working lands, and we need to make sure that our actions are inclusive. The last thing is influencers. We need to inspire people and we need to influence people to be able to make this change. And this last one I want to touch on a little bit, because I think we actually need a lot better influencers than what we have today, especially if we're looking at social media and where are the people that have the most followers. Let's look at Jason Derulo. When he got 22 million followers on TikTok, he ate 22 hamburgers. People loved it. It was great. Look at how many hamburgers he could eat. Kylie Jenner, she showed off her handbag collection worth over $1 million to her 301 million followers on Instagram. People love this, right? And if we continue to celebrate overconsumption of products, any kind of products, I think it's going to be very hard to achieve our goals unless we change the mindset out there in terms of what sustainable consumption is. So thank you again so much for this conversation. And the next steps, I hope, is we start to make sense of this jigsaw puzzle and what it looks like. And the only way that we can do it is working with each one of you. It's going to take all of us working together to put this puzzle together. Thank you.
Okay, so Brent is still here. We'll be around to answer questions as well. I'll introduce the panelists. Chow, who is the global leader for WWF's food practice, leads their efforts to enhance the sustainability of the global food system. Chow also led the 2021 UN Food Systems Summit, Action Track 3, Boosting Nature Positive Production. I'll introduce Amanda, and then I'll ask you each a couple questions. Amanda Leland is EDF's Executive Director. Marine scientist by training, Amanda has served in a number of leadership roles in her 18 years at EDF.
Not counting.
I think most recently as Executive Vice President, overseeing our programs in climate, ecosystems, energy, oceans, and health. So it sounds like everything, really. Okay, so Amanda, why don't I start with you? Oh, and Stefanos.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Who's virtual, joining us. And I'm not sure, yep, we're able to see him in that very small screen up there. Stefanos Fotiu is FAO's director in the Office of Sustainable Development Goals. He coordinates FAO's engagement in the 2030 Agenda Follow-up and Review. And he also heads the UN Food Systems Coordination Hub, which is responsible for helping to coordinate all of the coalitions that were stood up at last year's Food Systems Summit. So thank you, everybody. And as moderator, again, I'm going to give each person 5 minutes, and then I will do weird things if you're going over, and I'll have to interrupt you. So
I don't talk.
So Amanda, from where you stand as executive director of a climate-focused organization, how do you see food systems and climate being linked, and where should we focus our efforts for transformative action?
Great. Thank you, Jennifer. This is a great event. And Brett, thank you for that overview. I was rapidly taking notes and learning a ton. Maybe first I should just start by EDF is a climate-focused organization. That may be news to some of you in the room. We have a new focus around climate in everything that we do, stabilizing the climate, strengthening the ability of people and nature to thrive, and supporting people's health. So those are the three legs to our strategic stool at EDF. And getting to sustainable food systems is sort of central to all of that. Excuse me, I have in my throat. Tom, can you get me a water? Thank you. And we all know we're in a climate crisis. But does everybody know that we're also in a food crisis? And that these two things are inseparable. The flood, the droughts, the crop shortages, the changes in supply chain disruptions, the lowered fish catch globally. These things are all tied in many ways to climate and destabilizing the food systems on which we rely. Food systems are responsible for a third of all planet warming emissions. There's agricultural methane. There's production, from chemical fertilizer. There's farm equipment. All of these things, add up to a whole lot of emissions. And so our goal, and Brent laid it out, is to move quickly and to do it, I think, exponentially, right? And that's a huge challenge. And really, we're in a deadly cycle when it comes to our food systems, because food systems are producing greenhouse gases and doing so in a way that's harming our ability to actually produce the food for people to eat, right? So it's a twin challenge happening together. We need transformative change, and the time could not be more urgent, as Brent laid out. And we need to move to a place where we value nutrition. We value nutrition in as much as we might production. We produce around the planet 1.5 times the food that's needed to feed the people who are here today. Yet 1 billion people are still hungry and malnourished. That is a fundamental issue that we need to solve for as we move forward. We need to get policies that value at the local, the jurisdictional, the national, the international levels. We need to work at all levels of government to ensure that the policies increasingly recognize the importance of nutrition in this context. We need to think about the importance of blue foods. It isn't just about what the food is that we produce from the land. Food from rivers and lakes and oceans is actually really low carbon, relatively. And that's food that a lot of people, billions of people rely on right now, and often from the most climate vulnerable places in the world. We have to bring blue foods into the equation and really think about how we maximize that opportunity. And we need to think about how we can support farmers, fishers, and other food producers to get to predictive capabilities so that they can know what's going to be happening in their backyard or their community waters and take action to solve for that so they can be resilient and adaptive in the face of those changes. Predictive systems can help them design the portfolio that's going to make sense and maximize value, but also maximize nutrition in the places that need it. And then finally, I would say transition assistance is going to be really important. It's going to be a central way that we supercharge the ability to help the world's food producers get through and get to that 10-year or that 2030 horizon that Brent laid out. They're going to need a lot of help. And I think it's on us as civil society actors to help get to a place where those policies and incentives and support systems are in place to help them succeed too. So that's my opening salvo here. Was I under 5 minutes?
You were under 5 minutes. You have 18 seconds left. That's perfect. So Joe, hopefully you'll be able to meet that as well.
Which I will happily borrow.
You can have my 18 seconds. I'll trade you.
Thanks, Amanda. So Joe, as the UN Food Systems Summit Action Track lead for boosting nature positive food production systems, what do you see 1 year on? Almost exactly 1 year on. Are we moving fast enough to reach our SDG goals, our biodiversity goals, our climate goals?
Thanks. Well, the short answer is this. I mean, how can we be moving fast enough while the planet stays in the emergency room, right? I mean, no, we're not moving fast enough. I don't think we'll move fast enough in the next decades, but we need, and it's no accident that this report that Brent just introduced is called Exponential. Linear approaches, working at the margins of the food systems, doing less harm is not sufficient, right? We need transformative change. We need exponential action. And 1 year ago, almost to this exact day, in 2 days, actually, the Food System Summit, the UN Food System Summit will complete its first anniversary. And the summit was first of its kind gathering. It was the combination of 2 years of investment and collaboration between stakeholders from across the food systems. All stakeholders joined the summit process. And our job in the summit was to identify transformative solutions for people, for nature, for climate, for livelihoods, for resilience, so that it all works together. I had the opportunity to lead, and the great honor actually to lead Action Track 3 on boosting nature positive production. We did build with EDF and others a work stream that transformed into a coalition on blue and aquatic foods. So that was highlighted in our action track, and I'm very pleased to see this coalition of action to gain traction. Foods from the water are just as important as food from the lands, and we cannot do with our freshwater and oceans what we did to our land-based system. So there are important lessons for us to learn as we move forward. So at the time, last year, the summit was regarded as a great success. Perhaps not for the actual results, because like I said, the results will continue. The summit sparked a movement for transformation, but it's upon us today here to take action. So, so where are we 1 year on? Firstly, one of the primary things that the summit achieved was to more closely connect the three crises. There is a food crisis, food insecurity, with a biodiversity crisis and a climate crisis. The summit brought all this together. So from Antonio Guterres to many other key figures, the message was clear that we can only have healthy people and a healthy planet if we transform food systems. And Brent's initial talk showed that to us. You know, we are in an emergency, and without the food system, we can't resolve food insecurity, climate, and biodiversity crisis. So it was interesting that in COP26 in Glasgow last year, we made strong calls for a food day in all other COPs, right? Food deserves its space, and our calls were heard. So this year we had the UNCCD COP, and we had a food day for in that COP. There is a food and agriculture day in Egypt in a couple months, and the UAE government, the COP presidency for COP20, is committed to have food as at the main stage, you know, to help address the climate crisis and biodiversity crisis as well. So the deep integration of food into the climate and nature agendas is key to advancing the transformation we aspire to achieve exponentially. The second aspect of the summit is that more than 100 countries submitted what we call their national pathways for transforming food systems. And these pathways at the national level are acting as foundations now to translate global priorities into actual action on the ground. While these global priorities for food systems are now well established, most of the transformation will need to take place nationally, right? When we look at the NDCs, I mean, many countries deposit their shifts in agricultural systems to contribute to the pathway to Paris. But very little is happening in terms of food loss and waste, and even less so in terms of diets. We cannot forget that the food system has a production component, but it also has a consumption component without which we cannot achieve the 1.5 pathway to Paris. And it has a food loss and waste component. It's the combination of these three parts, production, consumption, and food loss and waste, that will deliver the exponential change that we need to achieve food system transformation. The third lesson that we learned with the summit, there are only 4, by the way. So it's the third
little extra.
The third lesson that we learned from the summit is that there are several dozen coalitions. Coalitions that we put together. The global community put together, and we need to rely on these coalitions to move forward. And lastly, the summit strengthened the collaboration, among NGOs from across the food systems, other partners. And we actually launched this year what we call the Food Forward Consortium. The Food Forward Consortium is all the NGO civil society organizations that have led the action tracks of the Food System Summit to advance national level action. And we are going to start that work by focusing on cities. Okay, so these are my reflections for now, Jennifer, and I'd be happy to discuss more. Thank you.
Thanks, Chow. It was great. You only went over slightly, and still good on time. I think I'll do a little self-promotion too. I think it's worth noting that EDF is part of one of the first food pavilions at this next COP as well, Food Systems Pavilion. And I think it's also a great sign when you're coming out of UNFSS that there are so many food pavilions that will be at COP this year. We had hoped for sort of a food court kind of where we would all collaborate together, but we'll see how the actual layout is on the ground. I'm sure it'll be chaos in Egypt, but hopefully it'll help us lift up some of these messages. So Stefanos, hopefully you're there. Yep. I will turn to you next. You have a great responsibility as the head of the UN Food Systems Coordination Hub. And we're hoping you can tell us a little bit more about the role of the hub itself and the broader role of the UN here and why this coordination is so essential for scaling the action that we're talking about.
Thanks very much, and nice to join you even virtually. Let me start by saying that I do agree that we need exponential action. Actually, I think that the problems are growing exponentially. And given the fact that we haven't taken action before, and I step here and support what Chow said, a little bit political correct. I think we are in many SDGs on a reverse trajectory, actually. In many SDGs, we are going completely wrong. It's not that we need to accelerate. We need first to change the course and then accelerate. So we have exponential problems. And I was looking before joining this a little bit my old maths, and there's something that is even bigger than exponential growth, and it's called factorial growth. So we need probably factorial acceleration to deal with their exponential problem. So the Food System Summit, it happened last year. It's almost 1 year from now. It was 23 of September. The hub was put together. We started being operational in the beginning of April of this year. And I would like to spend 2 minutes on what we are doing, but also complement this from what we are hearing from the most important actors of the follow-up to the Food System Summit, which is the countries, the governments, the food system national conveners. So the hub is here to support actually the national food system conveners in the countries to implement their pathways, and to do this by bringing together the combined assets of the UN system and what we are calling the ecosystem of support. And I know it's a very tricky term, the ecosystem of support, but the ecosystem of support is always entities that they emerge after the UN Food System Summit. We do have, of course, the coalitions of action for the food systems, but we have also consortia, we have alliances, we have other entities that they don't want to call themselves coalitions of action, but they will have an important follow-up. The Food Forward Consortium is one of them. So we want to bring together these assets and offer them to the countries. And this is a very important point that I would like to do, because many organizations, entities, alliances, they're asking how we can work together. And I have always one question for them. What is your offer to the countries? What is your offer to the country level? And this defines the way we work in the hub. So we have the country level support in the core of our attention. And at the same time, we are working with the ecosystem of support. We are preparing the food system stock taking moment that will happen next year in 2023, a year or a little bit, 2 years or 2 years and a little bit after the summit. And we work also with a mix of implementation, especially on finance, to try to leverage funds. I want to say that we try to leverage funds for the countries. We are not going to become a funding agency as a hub, but we want to leverage funds from other funds, from multilateral and bilateral donors, from institutions, from foundations, all of them. And I would say that the way we try to put things together, as I said, is always to have a lens on what is the offer to the countries, what offer you will provide to the countries. So on doing this, it's an exercise that we based on a survey we have done with the food system national conveners in the countries, and a continuous dialogue we have with them. Every month we meet at least once. We have also ad hoc dialogues, and we try to understand what they want. And I would like to finish by passing to you some messages that are coming from the food system national conveners when it comes to what support they need. So first of all, they need to understand, and especially in all this new food crisis with the billions of dollars announced by different countries, by different donors, how much of this money are really real new money for food systems, and how much of them are actually program money. And I know that it's a very sensitive issue, but I must say that we have seen that a lot of times all this money that they announced are not new money, are money that they were there and more or less are repackaged. And I think there's nothing bad if you repackage the money that if as a donor you repackage your money, but I think we need to be very clear to the countries because they have expectations. The second message we receive from the donors from the countries is the following. They tell us that you have convinced us that a food systems approach is the right way to proceed. But now we need to make this approach work at the practical operational level of our daily operations. So I have met many people that they work in national administrations, and they tell me the following. Every year, in the beginning of the year or at the end of the previous year, they receive a budget for their unit and some key performance indicators. And usually, for people working on agri-food, these KPIs are production-oriented. So this system needs to change, and they want support to change the system. The third thing that is coming from the conveners is that when it comes to interaction with the UN and non-UN system, they want two different things. When it comes to the UN, they want more coordination at the country level, and this is what we try to do through the UN resident coordinators and the UN country teams. When it comes to the non-UN actors, they are asking to stop asking for plans, stop asking for strategies, and really see that we have an agenda. It's called 2030 Agenda. We have plans. They're called National Pathways for Food System Transformations. And now the ecosystem, the non-UN actors and the donors, they need to support action and not planning. And that's very important. Unfortunately, still 8 years into the 2030 Agenda, we have cases where different donors, they want to do planning.
I'm going to give you 1 more minute.
And that will be my this is really my final message. Let's focus on implementation. Planning is enough. Planning for SDGs is happening the last 8 years. Let's focus on implementation. The plans are there, the agendas are there, and the countries are ready to receive support, and the Hub will be very pleased to facilitate this action. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stefanos. That's a lot to digest. And sometimes as moderator, I feel like I don't have the time or the privilege to digest all of that, but I think it was really useful information. And personally, having worked for government for a long time in the past, the whole new money versus money that just gets rearranged and it not being clear to countries is a really critical point. I think it's a great point to say, both are good, but we need to make it clear to countries what's what, because otherwise we're just kind of going around in circles. So thank you for that. I want to continue to drill down into the role of natural climate solutions, since that was really the focus of this Exponential Roadmap report, as well as how sustainable food systems transformation might play out at the national level. To me, are really the two themes today. And so I'm going to go to Amanda again and just ask, how important are natural climate solutions to helping solve the climate crisis? And what role do they play in the context of food systems?
Thank you, Jennifer. Well, I think Brent laid it out well. Essential, absolutely necessary. Conserving, restoring, and sustainably managing, to your point, and the graphics that you show, our lands in the natural systems on which we require, it provides up to 20% of what's needed by 2030. So fundamentally, it's necessary and important. Irreplaceable is probably the word to say. Tropical forests is where I want to drill in a bit, because I think there's a particular importance around tropical forests. If we protect forests today, we make gains today on reducing emissions, right? So that there's urgency and there's importance to protecting forests. And protecting tropical forests is also where there's a lot of complication around land use. Land use is the biggest driver of the decline of tropical forests, in particular, agricultural development. And so, it's right now, it's sort of going back to what I said before, it's a losing situation over time on both fronts. So we're losing on fighting climate change as forests decline. And as forests decline even more, we're losing on the agricultural productivity over time because of related water management issues or pollinating. We need the forests and we need agriculture to work together in order for this to be successful, right? It's not one or the other, it's a both and. And so we're always looking for the elusive win-win, right? That's where we need to turn to the previous comments, Stefanos. I don't know if we need to go factorial. I don't know if that's possible, but we definitely need to turn the tide and move faster. And I think this is a place where there's that real potential to do so. There's an example in Brazil of one jurisdiction that has done a good job protecting forests and also improving agricultural outcomes. So it can be done. I'm sure you know a lot more about this than I do. And there's also this great opportunity with the recently launched LEAF Coalition, where donors like Amazon and Norway are putting up now $1 billion worth of money. And the whole purpose is to get to jurisdictional level conservation of tropical forests. And that provides real power. There's dozens of jurisdictions around the world that have signed up and have expressed interest in LEAF. And ensuring LEAF can be successful is a practical, doable, on the table opportunity today to supercharge and get to those dramatic outcomes that Brent said we need to get to. So if you haven't learned about LEAF, we're happy to dig in with you more about it. It's a really important opportunity. I think just to if I were to say one more thing, it's we got to move fast. We got to move carefully, including the inclusivity aspect of what you raised and ensuring that communities are part of the equation. And we can do that. And there are win-wins on the table when it comes to protecting forests and improving the outcomes for agriculture and providing for the food that we need in the future. Is I in under my comment?
Oh, yes. Thank you, Amanda. And I
That's the
failed to
most
say,
important question.
I failed to say that I'm hoping we have shorter responses for this next round. So we can get to, you came in, I think at 3 minutes, which is exactly what I was looking for. So I'll ask Chow one more question, and then I think I'd love to turn it to the audience. So if you have any questions, maybe start formulating them now. But Amanda, I think that's a great connection too to what Stephanos was saying. I think it was your third reflection from the national conveners around where, the high level strategies are necessary, but it's really time to move into action agendas. And so I think a lot of the jurisdictional approaches are really helping us to move into something more concrete, something that people can see that's more tangible and implementable, rather than something so big that that's sometimes hard to get your hands around. Chow. So I know Brent already mentioned this, but I think you have this report coming out that Brent mentioned. Will you tell us a little bit more about WWF's work focusing at the national level?
Sure, thanks. I promise to be within 3 minutes.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, at WWF, we've come to realize in the food practice that celebrating commitments have not taken us very far. We need action. We need to move from raising the glass and toasting commitments until we have the first action delivered on the ground in the water for nature and for people. That's when we succeed, that we can raise the glass, not for commitments, but for action. And based on that, we have decided in the last year, how can we accelerate national level action exponentially or factorially, Stefano? It just needs to move fast, right? And the Great Food Puzzle, the report that Brent mentioned, we're trying to do two things. One is to find a way to create archetypes for food systems at the national level and begin to cluster countries that share the basics of each archetype. And then across archetypes of countries or typologies, we identified 20 levers that could accelerate change and scale change at the national level, right? And each of these archetypes, archetypical countries in a particular set, will choose different levers that can play to their strengths. So that by learning lessons in one country, in a particular typology or archetype, that could inform action for the others in that subset. So we are using as first cases to test these archetypes and the levers. We're choosing Colombia, Brazil, Kenya, and the UAE. And this report is it's being reviewed right now, and hopefully we will launch at CFS in 1 month. So we are hoping at WWF that, by clustering these countries according to their typology and identifying these levers, this could accelerate action on the ground. So, thanks.
Thanks, Joe. came in plenty of time. So you can have that time back for another question, perhaps. Let me see if there's any questions from the audience, please. You want to introduce yourself first?
Sure. My name is Annalise Winter, and I host the Nordic Culture podcast. I also work with big corporations, helping them to figure out what to invest in venture scouting and fostering collaboration across different silos. And I can't hear the word exponential or Moore's law without thinking about technology. So we've also been talking a lot about active solutions. So I'd love to hear about the intersection of the two of those and where you see technology fitting in versus you really need solutions based in nature and the technology doesn't, which is also however your organization is thinking about that.
It might be helpful if you also repeat the question for the people online. They might not be able to.
Sure. And Brent, do you want to come back up?
Sure.
You're welcome to come back up too and share your
Leave
thoughts.
in the shot.
So I'm not sure I'll be able to paraphrase all that.
I think so much. So
You want to come up actually, and then
Come on.
make
Join
my
us
job
here.
easier.
We're one big family. And we actually need to do
Hello, listeners from the world.
like
Basically,
she's over there.
the question is, how does technology fit into what we've been discussing today and the solutions, the nature-based solutions aspect of it, and creating exponential change?
Thank you. I'm happy to put my name on the list of.
Great. Go for it, Amanda.
Say,
Do you want to start?
Let me start with Amanda and go over to
Okay.
Chow.
So I love that question. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was actually in Mumbai for EDF's climate tech convening, where we brought together entrepreneurs, startups with possible investors and others, really focused on what are some of the technological solutions for the future and homegrown in India specifically. And we had several that were around food systems and natural climate systems. They're really exciting. I'm happy to send you some. They each gave a really compelling talk. Happy to connect you up with some of those entrepreneurs. I think the answer is we need new ideas. I'd like to say we have all the answers. We certainly have all the answers we need to get going, right? But we also need to look for some ways to make the change that's needed from a technological basis. The other thing I would point out is on methane. Agricultural methane is a huge source of methane pollution. Methane is the major driver of what the climate change that we're experiencing today. We have got to address methane emissions. And there's different ways to do that. Some of it is very practical and we can do today around manure management and other things. Some of it is diet related that we can do today with cows. And some of it is tools of the future, like the DSM product Bovaer, and what can be added to what cows eat that actually reduce their burping, because we all know it's their burps, right, that actually cause the changes. And so I think we need all of those options on the table. I don't think it's either or. I think it's all of it. And over time, we're going to get smarter about some of these ways to dramatically scale up and get to a factorial future in which action is happening and results are happening and progress is happening at scale in a lot of different places that have a lot of different cultural contexts. Mm-hmm. And so we have to do it in a way that's culturally aware. Again, homegrown solutions are so important. But from my point of view, there's a lot of room to go with technology as part of the toolkit. Mm-hmm.
Jad, you want to change?
yeah, for us at WWF, yet another report that we have commissioned. It's called the new
You are
food.
very reporty.
Yeah, it's very reporty, isn't it? I mean, it's going to be launched in February, and it's called the New Food Horizons. And we are exploring the new technologies, not because every time we talk about technology, sometimes we say, what's currently being done that we can change, right? Innovation is anything that is new and useful. It can be incremental. It can be transformative. It can be whatever that helps move us forward. So in the New Food Horizons, we want to know what's happening out there. What's next for the food system? Are we going to continue on the same monocropping model that is destroying nature, compromising livelihoods, is not helping with climate change, to say the least? Or do we need a different type of production models? And it's not only about technology in the sense of improving machinery or the thinking, but also what are the innovations that are out there in the socioeconomic context to bring the masses that today, like there are 160 million people suffering from chronic hunger. What types of social arrangements do we need to innovate on to bring all those who are excluded from the food system into the food system? And then again, I always keep thinking, why do we need more or new technologies if we currently produce food for 10.5 billion people? We cannot even take care of the distribution of this food because about 40% goes to waste. So, I don't want us to, at least at WWF, to get fascinated by producing more if we cannot address the systemic lock-ins that the food system is in today. There are power relations. There are profits being made at the expense of nature. Rent-seeking behaviors spread everywhere. We need to address these systemic lock-ins. Otherwise, we'll just be going to produce more food that never gets eaten and excluding people from the equation. So that's my.
I want to build on this last remark, and I'm trying to squeeze into the frame here. So I'm going to get very close
down again.
Within the report, we did not factor in new technologies at all. It was based on existing technologies. So we did not want to depend on something that we had to invent to solve ourselves out of this problem that we're in. We said we can do it now today with the knowledge that we have. So I think any technology that we implement is icing on the cake and should be considered as being able to help, but we should not rely on it. And I'm thinking about things such as carbon capture and storage, that dark green, how we pull carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. There's, a lot of people that are thinking we're going to somehow invent some crazy storage principle for pulling all this carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and plugging it in, but it's not invented yet. But we know that trees and nature can do it for us, right? So there is well-known nature-based solutions that we can rely on to do it for us. So I think technology is good, but it can also be a bit of a, just as long as we don't lean on it, like what you said, Chow.
I think taking my privilege as moderator too, I'll chime in. And, I think when we talk about innovation and technology, I think we want to remember that there's old innovation and technology too, that we've actively tried to dismantle or are not so commercially viable, orphan crops, ancient grains, indigenous practices that, sometimes the focus shifts away from there when we really talk about technology and innovation in a way that, that may not serve us going forward. So just remembering that whole picture when we talk about sort of what the latest gadget is really important.
Yep.
I think I saw.
Can I have just 1 minute on this?
Stephanos, go ahead.
I think technology will be the long-term solution, absolutely. But I think we don't have time to wait for the solution. And I want to bring into the picture something that is called regulation. And it's, there's an allergy all over the world when we use this word regulation. But for me, this is the only way that we can make some things happen today. And I want to be very clear here. I mean, the right to pollute, it's still not priced. The pollution is not priced. And people and corporations are doing this for free. So I would agree very much with Brent that we don't need new things on the block, but we need really to apply something we have agreed 30 years ago, the Rio principles, the polluter-based principle, all of these things. And I think the solution is much more easier. And some years ago, 40 years ago, the world discovered that the tobacco industries were killing people and they heavily regulated them. I'm sorry, but some food corporations are killing people, but nobody regulates.
Yeah.
Thanks, Stephanos. Okay, so I love all the questions. If I may, I'll try to call on one, maybe two of you to answer them so we can get through some more of them. Please go ahead. In the black shirt. Sure, yes, please.
Come on up. This is a very awkward. Sorry. Like we're living in 1985. I don't know.
Talking about the technology.
I know. We actually
It didn't work. Yeah.
I'm Daphne from Indufor, and my question is about, as we try to make this transition as fast as possible, how do we keep it just? And when you do look at examples of reform and transformation, what share of that is being driven by large companies? For example, in the alternative proteins development, we see a lot of new R&D thinking about technology. And in some ways, they're able to scale up much faster than decentralized approaches, but then you have issues around equity. So I'm just curious how you balance between scaling up fast through large companies and risking consolidation versus supporting more decentralized approaches. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephanie. Is anyone burning to take this, or I'll call on people? Yeah. Chow, do you want to give it a shot?
Yeah. It's a part of the just transition. Here's the thing. I mean, and going back to what I was saying earlier about incentives and disincentives to change the status quo in food production, for example. We have huge subsidies, that are being deployed, that are harmful to nature and are harmful to people as well. There is also private financing that is going to reward the wrong things, right? The wrong foods, and it's not covering everybody. So there is a big global movement. It's called the Just Rural Transitions, in which they aim to, and we are part of that at WWF. There was a lot of movement within the UN food system in that regard, which is to redirect these harmful subsidies and private finance into forms of, if you want to call it like a payment for ecosystem services. And companies have a big role to play here, because then we enter the world of blended financing, which is, it's one of the pathways for change. So perhaps, Stefanos, I don't know how much the hub is looking into blended finance to accelerate action and bring on board private capital into that, especially from large corporations, to address the question. Maybe you can say a few words about that.
So, Joe, we are looking on ways that we can leverage finance and how we can support countries to come up with a comprehensive portfolio that it will include public, private, global, domestic resource mobilization. I think that everybody needs to really assign what needs to be assigned. So the public money are needed for pilots to kick off things, but the private investments will be the ones that they will make things happen. And on this, also we need to try to make sure that what is called a private investment on food systems is indeed an investment on food systems, and it's just as the business as usual investments on agricultural production via another package. And on this, we work with the finance system to define some trackers for food system finance, so at least we can have some baselines on what should be called the food system investment, finance, or even donation. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to the next question. Come on up.
You're the next
Join the crowd.
These are very awkward
Yes.
setup.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Barry. I'm communications manager for Solar One for 9 more days, after which I'm out on my own working on private communications. My question is, given the guy who eats 22 hamburgers and millions of dollars worth of pocketbooks, what kind of stories do we need to tell? What's the messaging? What's the communication that we have to get out there to deal with the consumption portion of the puzzle? Maybe the question is for Brent or whoever. How do we compete with that and make connections with people that leads to transformation of behavior? It is a hard question. That's what I'm working on.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have an answer other than we have to solve it. And I think we need to put a lot more money into communications than what we currently are. It seems like when we have these ideas, we tend to launch reports or do other things, and communications tends to get sidelined, or you reserve the last $1,000 of your budget to somehow communicate it. And we need a lot more money poured into that. And if you follow what big business is doing, they understand this, and they understand how important it is to influence that way. And that's why they put so much money into it. And, we have to do the same things. One of the things that I know is not helpful is to go out there with the message of blaming people and shaming people. I don't think that works. I don't think it works with the message of saying that we're going to take something away, because people don't like that message. We have to create a vision which is hopeful and additive and a future that we want to live in. And that's some kind of message. And that's why we need smart comms people like you to start thinking about this.
Oh, can I jump in? Please. Just I want to amplify your last point. I was actually a little surprised by your slide in that talk, because it felt like maybe these people were doing something wrong by pointing out that he was eating 22 hamburgers. I don't know. I won a lobster eating contest once. I'm pretty proud of that. I guess, and I think what is effective communications, and people who know me well know that I have a very strong point of view on this. So you picked up on a good question. Is like, we got to show the world what good looks like. We can't tell them what's bad and how they're bad, right? We got to show them what good looks like. And so the more examples that we can show where there are real people in real places doing real things that make real change, the more people believe that this is possible. The less we have to rely on saying, like, we need to get it all done in the next 9 years or we're going to collapse, right? The more we can show points of light, points of hope, progress with real people in their real circumstances, it changes everything.
Thank you. All right, next question. Please come on up. We'll probably have time for one more. So if you're really wanting to ask, queue up here.
Hi, everyone. My name is Madeline. I'm a mediator and program manager at Meridian Institute. I spend a lot of my time working on domestic agriculture policy and talking to farmers. And I appreciated your comments about the need to really bring farmers, fishers, and food producers along in this journey. And so I'm curious to hear the panel's thoughts about what's needed to really bring these kind of national level commitments and plans down to an individual producer level and catalyze that behavior change that's needed on the ground.
Thank you.
You want to start?
Yeah, I'd like to start because it hinges on a previous point that I made about the just rural transition. We have to stop, I think, blaming farmers and fishers for everything that is happening to the planet. Farmers and fishers are economic agents. They need to be enabled in what they will do next, right? And they respond to subsidies, they respond to credit in the bank. And I think that the global community needs to do all it can do to enable farmers, fishers, especially in poor communities, to do the right thing, right? They want to do the right thing, and most of them are already doing. It's the very few that control assets and resources and big chunks of land that we should really question. So we need to enable farmers, fishers everywhere to become nature positive if they are not already. I think without doing that, and this is part of the work that even Meridian Institute is doing on the just rural transition on repurposing subsidies, harmful subsidies to the right incentives to do. Okay, so that's my.
Thanks, Chow. Amanda?
Agree completely. And my history, my tenure, my story as an environmentalist is all about working with individual previously fishermen and fishing communities and driving change from within those. And not saying that we show up with the answers, but really working towards shared outcomes and shared goals. The way we drive long-term change is not just showing what good looks like and what that hope is, but it's actually people feeling the benefits in their own lives. When they feel the benefits and understand the benefits, and without our food producers, I don't know, I'm going to go pretty hungry. I want them to succeed because it helps me succeed and my family succeed. And so working with them to think through what are their desired outcomes, what does good look like to them, and then working towards some really operational, to Stefano's point, like we got to move beyond the planning and into the action. And there are really specific things that can be done today to support them through that. And I think there's real promise there.
Yeah, if I could just add to that briefly, is we need better roadmaps at the national level. We need to show policymakers exactly what they need to do and we need to hold their hands and take them, on this journey with us. And there's been some great organizations like Fable and Folu that have been working on this. We've been working on it and others. And I think that's something that we really need to scale, is just a very clear, tangible pathway about how this can be achieved.
There's one more question. Okay, then I think we're going to end on time. Great.
Jennifer, you have done your job.
Well, then this is maybe dangerous, but the panel, if anyone on the panel has one burning thing that they feel they haven't communicated yet, I'll give you 30 seconds to do so. Go ahead.
Don't ask a Brazilian if he wants to talk more. I think, one of the main things that we need to address in moving us forward is the issue of protein, right? So the more that we can stimulate nature positive protein production and consumption, the better off we will be. This, I think, will help us unlock big transformations in the food system as we see it today. Thank you.
I got one final point. Can we please join forces and make this happen? The work in food is scaling up so quickly. There's so many people doing it, and I just want to make sure that it doesn't become fragmented and siloed. And somehow we got to fight that, and we have to make sure that we're all pointing in the same direction, not doing the same thing, but at least pointing in the same direction.
Mm-hmm. You're stealing my closing remarks, Brent.
Sorry.
We're all doing it together.
Yes. Stefanos, I know it's always hard to be the virtual one. Maybe I can give you a very quick last word.
Let's start acting on the planning we have done the last years, and by bringing together all the stakeholders, all the people, without creating new platforms, but using the existing ones. Thank you.
Thank you. So what I was going to say was, from this report, there was a clear mantra, protect, manage, restore. And I wanted to add collaborate, which I'm really glad we're doing this with WWF today. Even though we many times have the same objectives, we can work at cross purposes with each other. And we don't have any more time or capacity to waste doing that. So just really seconding what that message is, and thanking all of you. Thank you, Stefanos. Thank you, everybody here in the room for joining us today and keeping us off for the rest of the day.
Thank you. Thanks for hosting. Thank you all. Thanks everybody online.
Thanks.